Hello everyone and welcome to the Constructive Criticism Network. This network is here to help you improve at Magic the Gathering at every level. From Pauper Leagues to Top 1000 Mythic, we've got you covered. If you want to hear the entire network, head on over to our sponsor at puremtgo.com, where you can hear each and every show, each and every week, and check out their sponsor, MTGO Traders, and tell them that the CCMTG Network sent you. Now sit back, enjoy the show. From YouTube, podcasts, and more, here's this week's episode from ConstructiveCriticism.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 319th episode of Constructed Criticism. I am your host, Mason, and I am joined by our now official full-time co-host, Allison Warfield. Allie, it's so great to finally be able to say your name on the podcast. I've been saying she and who, like I've been alluding to it, but now I get to say it's Allie. How you feeling?
Oh, it's awesome to be here and actually get back into podcasting. So, very excited.
Nice. So, Allie, some people might not know you. Who are you, Allie? How do I know you? I want to know it together. Like, give me a little history about who you are.
Who are you?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, like you said, I am on Team Nova with Mason. Been on Team Nova. This is my second year, I guess. I am a 2020 Rivals League member after an decent finish at MC7. I've been playing Magic competitively for about 2 years now, and I have recently started streaming a lot, so you can catch me there too, I guess.
Yeah, feel free to plug it now. Sometimes we plug it at the end of the show. I feel like I don't want this to go the wrong way, but I feel like if I say Meebo, a lot of people kind of like perk up. You know what I mean? So.
Oh yeah, maybe y'all have heard of me from Twitter as well. Awesome memes, I guess.
I think they're good. I don't know. It's a weird experience. You know, I think I was talking to you about this at Richmond, but I was like, you know, standing in our living room. It's like, yeah, you were just someone who I thought was really funny on Twitter like 3 years ago, you know, and now we're like doing this, and at the time we were talking about doing this, and so it's a wild ride. I think your memes are good. So that's all I'm saying. So
yeah, it's kind of surreal to be like, 3 years ago I started being active on Twitter and just kind of getting to know people without even really being too entrenched in the Magic community, and now that's my day-to-day life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so you started. I wanted to ask you about this too. So you started grinding tournaments and playing SCGs 2.5 years ago. Is that right?
Yeah, about then. Yeah,
and then last year you finished just barely outside of top 32 for the yearly leaderboard, right? So
33rd.
That's what I thought. I didn't want to bring that up, but I was like, you know, it's worth mentioning a little bit. Still, you know, a great performance. Obviously, 1 point shy of where we want to be, but yeah. So you're grinding the SCG too. So that's going to be kind of a shift about this podcast. You know, in the past, with hosts when we had Michael and Spencer and Kling, they were really focused on Grand Prix. And, you know, since I've come in, SCGs are kind of the thing that I participate in. And Allie's kind of got it all when it comes to the tournaments. You know, she's Rivals, so she's going to be talking to us about the Grand Prix and the Mythic Championships and stuff like that. And then I guess we get to talk about the Mythic Championship, or the Players Tour, Players Tour 2 in July or June now that it's been changed because of everything going on in the world. And so we kind of get it all with Allie here. So it's exciting. I'm excited to talk about things, you know, on kind of a more week-to-week basis, because sometimes it was, you know, when we're during Grand Prix, they're kind of more spread out around the world, and they're just weeks where it's we're talking about things from afar. But between SGs and stuff like that, we're going to kind of be on the ground floor once things get back to normal.
Oh, yeah.
It's pretty
a lot to go through.
Yeah, it's not going to be a boring week ever. That's the exciting part, right? Well, I guess it won't be. It will be a busy week always. This is the way to say it.
I mean, yeah. Even now that we're not going to events regularly, it's still there's so much going on, and we still have so much to talk about, which is really exciting. I never imagined that Magic could still be, I guess, as competitive as it is when we're not allowed to leave our homes.
Yeah, that's something that probably, you know, we want to talk about, but let's kind of talk about that now, because there's so much going on and we can't play paper Magic. But it seems like there's almost more events in a weird way because of that.
Yeah, there's there's so much.
Yeah,
just thinking about that, everything was just recently announced within this last week, so it's hard to kind of keep track of everything. Of there's the CFB online Magic Fests, which are really cool, which entail like all week long tournaments to try and qualify for weekend events. And what else? There's the Magic Super Qualifiers that are like big PTQs essentially.
Yeah, and then there's also the challenges daily on Modo. There's people coming up with their own tournament series. We saw Lotus Box run a tournament this past weekend for patrons and people who wanted to opt in. We saw like celebrity tournaments with Todd Anderson and Scooter running their COVID fundraising tournament. I couldn't think of the word. I was like, what's that thing that's going on around the world? I can't think of its name.
What's the thing causing all this?
Yeah. But yeah, so there's a lot of opportunities to play Magic right now, even though it's not the most important thing in the world, but it's still something that is a great way to spend your time. It's a great way to channel some energy. And, we're not health experts in this area, but like staying away from people and doing that is like the best thing any one person can do, is minimizing your interaction with other people in a physical sense. And so there's all these great opportunities to do that. You probably love playing Magic if you're listening to a competitive Magic the Gathering podcast. So go look at doing stuff like that, and then in 2 to 3 months, hopefully things will be kind of back to normal-ish. So we just kind of want to talk about that going on in the world, since it's such a big thing. And Allie, you're actually going to commentate one of the CFB event things, or I guess 2 of them this week, right?
Yes, I actually mixed up my time zones when filling out my availability for commentary, and so my first commentary session is going to be I guess depending on when this podcast comes out, it'll be tomorrow or
later
Tuesday.
Today.
Later today, Tuesday the 24th at 10 p.m. my time to 2 a.m. When I originally signed up for it, I was like, oh yeah, like 8 to midnight, that works, that's awesome. And they're like, all right, you got it. I'm like, oh, I'm staying up till 2 a.m. I guess.
You love to see it and you hate to see it, but so I think it's a blessing in disguise though, right? Like this episode's going to be up late tonight at the time we're recording it, or early morning on Tuesday, and that just means the listeners get to go and watch you do it. It was just a happy accident,
Well, perfect.
Yep. Well, let's move on to always improving, kind of get back into the normal things of the show. For those of you at home, the big part of the show here is always improving, and the act of trying to get better at Magic little by little. And it really is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's not one tournament doesn't define your success for your life. And so we're trying to always improve at something. And so during these lock-in times, I've been practicing prowess, and soon I'm going to start playing like actual burn, because Allie, I cannot play those decks to save my life. I am miserable at those decks.
Oh my gosh, I relate to that so much. It took me forever to learn how to play burn, like, well. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, everyone says this is, like, quote, the easy deck. And I'm just sitting here like, Bolt?
Yeah.
You?
Yeah, Bolt
and
only
it just,
has
like,
9
never,
options.
it just, like, never worked for me. I don't know.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It's funny because I always hear that too. They're like, oh, play burn, it's the easy deck or whatever. And it's just like, sure, there are some easy games, but there are games where like I have this Bolt and they're at 12 and I can like hit them where I can push more damage, and I'm just like, my brain melts. It's like information overload, too many choices, I can't figure it out. And so that is it's like an actual problem. And I think it's not something that I want to be like a huge part of my game. It's like a real weakness, I feel, because if let's say we're getting ready for the Invitational, right, and y'all are telling me prowess is the best deck by a lot, you have to tell me it's the best deck by miles, where I'm just not going to play because I'm too afraid that I'll mess up those decision points, even though if I just spend some time to learn it. And so while I'm locked in here, I just figured, well, I got some time, let's play it. So I've been playing some leagues. I'm really happy with my 2-3-2s, just pretty excited about that. Got a couple of records worse than that, but that's okay. I'm going to be happy about my accomplishments. And so, it's great. So
yeah, I definitely struggle with the like playing decks that are comfortable towards my playstyle or something. So I think that's a great way to just like keep improving your Magic game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to have as big a range as possible. I love Primeval Titan, but sometimes I guess one day eventually he won't be right. Now it just seems like he's always right, but
Yeah.
So Allie, how have you been improving this past week?
I mean, like I said, I've been working on my stream a lot, and I know for me it's really difficult to like stream and play Magic, so I kind of worry about like the audience that's going to stick around. So just like, I don't know, being able to like 3-2 some leagues or like actually just play some good games of Magic, even if I do poorly, is really awesome because having your attention split between two things equally is really hard. So that is something I'm currently working on improving.
Yeah, I definitely know that feeling. I remember when I first started streaming, it was really just to have like a VOD of my games so I could go back and like rewatch them, because I didn't realize like on Magic Online you could go rewatch your games. And so obviously the solution was just record them. And I was like, well, I might as well stream it. And like, you know, no one was tuning in, and I don't have like a huge crowd. Like, you know, you have like a pretty big amount of people in your chat like always going. And even when I have a couple people going, my play plummets. It is so bad. And so I can't even imagine having like a constant stream of chat going. And then, you know, it's just so hard, especially because like, I don't know about you, but I feel like the obligation to try to be entertaining and like partake in the chat, you know? It's not like chat's happening around me. I want to be part of it. So I that's a hard one.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, my goal is to like, I guess, get better with that, and just like, or even just like have good games, not make very obvious mistakes, which is like very hard because my split attention is awful, but I think we're getting there.
Yeah, I definitely, it seems like something that like we can get better, but it's always going to kind of hold us back. But then when you get to play off stream, you feel so strong. I don't know about like if you've had that, but I like played a league 3-2, was like really mad at how bad my play was. Like rage played the league and like 5-0, 10-0, and I was like, oh yeah, I got it. It's all good.
So, oh yeah, I haven't played much competitive Magic off stream just because I mean, like I've been streaming. It's a lot of Magic all at once, but like I'm crushing those vintage cubes.
Love it. So hang on, we gotta have this conversation. You're a vintage cuber. Are you a mono greener or a mono whiter? Where are we at? And don't tell me you're a storm player, because I'll have to find a new co-host. I just went through all this work, and now we're gonna be here. So,
well, I did do 2 drafts in a row of mono green, so I guess we're gonna have to say that.
That's an acceptable answer. Keeps my heart happy. I'm a mono whiter. I'm a psychopath, but you know,
that's fair.
Yeah. Well, that's going to do it for the Always Improving segment. And now we're going to talk about the Patreon, because the Patreon's basically going to be staying the same. Me and Allie had some conversations, and we just kind of, I want to make sure we have some time to finalize it, hopefully here in the coming week. But basically, everything you see is what you're going to get. The biggest change, really, and if you're already a patron, you saw it. I sent a message out to everyone, and I posted in the Facebook group, is that we're moving to a Discord instead of a Facebook group. Simply for like a couple of reasons. Like the biggest one is that most Magic communities and things like that happen on Discord, and so that kind of makes it like a one-stop shop for you, the listener, if you're like maybe a patron of a couple shows like Arena Deck List or Grindcast, you know, and maybe us as well. And then it makes it so you don't have to jump around and you don't have to think about it, and it's just all compact. And it's also just a thing where it's going to be easier to do it like that. The backup thing is the Facebook algorithm like hides posts from people. Like I know when Spencer was the host, he got frustrated a couple times because like Facebook legitimately just didn't show him like patron posts, and it didn't notify him. So he had to like turn on notifications for every post on the page. So anytime anything happened, he got notified. But that was the only way. So we've had some issues with Facebook, and so we're going to try moving to this Discord model. There's a link on the Patreon. If you become a patron and you can't find anything like that, feel free to shoot the Patreon a DM or shoot me a DM, and we'll take care of that for you instantly. And that's really going to be it. The Patreon's going to be pretty much the same. We're still sponsored by Oasis Games, and we love Oasis Games. Allie, you get to hear about all the great deals, I think, for maybe the first or second time here. But did you know if you go to oasisgames.com and you use code CCMTG, you get 4% off every order? And for your first order, if you use the code Would That Be Good, you get 15% off. So you can get I'm sorry, you can't use them together anymore. They changed that recently with the Crystal Commerce. But you can get 15% off your first order. So if you're trying to save up for like a Pioneer deck for post the COVID stuff, or maybe you just have disposable income and you've been saving it, you can make a big purchase for like a deck at one time now that you're not traveling or using that money for other things. And then boom, get a huge savings. That's what I did when I first got into Modern. I bought Titan Shift all at once, and at the time you could use both codes, so I got 19% off my first order. But huge. We love Oasis Games, and we're glad to have them sponsor us. And then of course you can go to the Patreon and ask the big question every week. So Allie, are you ready for this week's Patreon question?
I'm ready.
All right, so Adrian asks, when watching a stream for the purpose of learning, what are some good questions to ask? Also, can you briefly go into how to ask the questions in a way that isn't off-putting or rude to the streamer? And so I really like this question, and it does break down to two parts, because really what Adrian's asking is, how can I ask like precise questions and good questions, and then also wants to make sure like what should I be looking for even if I'm not asking those questions. So Allie, you just talked about how you've been streaming. What's your first response when you hear this?
I think the first question is a little more complicated, and I'd love to have like a little bit of discussion with you about that. But
Let's
like I think for the second half of the question is like how to ask questions in a way that isn't really off-putting or rude to the streamer, is just like, this is probably like basic help in real life too, is just like, don't like go into a question under the assumption that like what you think or your mindset is what the streamer is also thinking. So like I know when I'm streaming, a lot of people will like approach me with questions like, oh well, why didn't you do this line or this line or this line? And that's like a little stressful for me, because then I have to think like, all right, well, what did I do? Is this wrong? Like, did I mess up? How am I supposed to even answer this question anymore? Because like maybe I'm just wrong, and et cetera, et cetera. Whereas like when people are like, hey, like, what was your thought process behind this play right here, like this specific play, then I can kind of like dig into my thought process, give you a like well-rounded answer, so I actually kind of like remember the situation and know what's going on, and then we can talk about like alternative plays as well. That's just me though, I don't know.
No, yeah, I think that's good. I think it also kind of shows like the two questions in my mind are kind of similar, but the way they're presented are so different, right? Like, why did you make that play and what was your thought process are essentially the same question, but the way you phrase them and approach it is so different, right? Like, when you say, why do you make that play, even though, like, maybe their intentions aren't that way, sometimes it's just a text screen, right? And maybe you're, like, in the play in the moment, you're, like, feeling it comes off the wrong way, and it isn't meant to be that way. It just happens, and so it comes off in a different way. Where if it asks, "What is your thought process?" Not only is it like a better learning moment, because like if you frame it in that way, they'll kind of maybe go through it more, and so they're just saying like, "I shot the land because I want to bluff Aether Gust." It's more like, in this matchup, if my opponent knows what matters, me shocking this land signifies I have Aether Gust, but we also have this stomp in our hand. So if they brought in Legion War Boss, I'll be able to do that. And that's just like, a random example, right? And so I think it's great, like that answer. Just the way you present the question, I think, is super important. And I think it will vary for different people as well. Like some people, when they stream, are more focused about maybe entertainment, and they'd be happy to help you and talk about stuff, but they might not be focused on like the thought process so much, right? Like I know I've definitely streamed before where like my literal goal with this stream is just to cube draft and talk to chat, and I'm playing to burn tickets. And if we 2-1 and I make my money back, praise up. So I imagine things will be different for everyone. But yeah, I agree with that, and I do want to talk about this one when you're watching, for the purpose of learning. What are some questions to ask? What are your thoughts on that? Because you said you want to go a little deeper on it. I would love to hear yours before I kind of tell mine.
I think when I kind of like am watching a stream and trying to like figure out a good like question for like learning more, say, is like I don't know, I try and dig deeper than a lot of like why this play here or whatever, like yeah, like I think those questions have a lot of benefit, especially if you're like learning a specific deck. But a lot of like my questions now are kind of like how the streamer likes to approach a matchup. I ask a lot of questions about sideboarding because that's something I am not very good at. So I don't know. I like to ask questions that are more like theoretical or kind of like just like conceptually thinking about the deck in general instead of specific plays, which like I know it's easier to ask about specific plays because that's like literally what you're watching on screen and that's like what's catching your attention and everything. But I just always try and like dig a little deeper. I'll have to like try and think of an example, but
yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I think those kind of questions are really important too, right? Like to understand. I think for me personally, the play-by-plays don't even really matter to me. Like even in like a tournament or whatever, a lot of it matters to me is like what the thought process was, or like what was going through your mind, right? And I think it was, I can't remember who it was, but I was talking to someone recently at a tournament, and like I like saw their play, and I like asked them what their question was, even though I thought their play was like 100% right. I wanted to know how they got there because I was thinking about something, and then they told me that, I wish I could remember the details of it, but they told me what they were thinking, and they thought about it in a different way than me, and I was like, oh, I never even like thought of it that way. Like I totally would have done the exact same, like I would have played the cards exactly the same, but I didn't think about that reasoning to do that. And I think once you like understand the different types of reasonings or hear different thought processes, in my opinion at least, that then opens the door for you to think that way, right? And so you kind of think like, okay, Allie's told me like when she's playing prowess, she tries to think of Bolt as like this way, right? And so I'll think about it that way, and then I'll think, well, actually, I also heard from like, you know, Kevin that he thinks about it this way. And I'll think about those in the different ways, and lots of times you'll end up in the same spot, but they can be helpful in figuring out different ways and also just viewing the matchup in a different way. I don't know how that does that relate to you. Do you find that's also the same thing?
Yeah, I actually in SCG Indy, I was doing a little bit of like side coaching, helping one of my friends with Thoughtseize decks because they had never played Thoughtseize before. So I just sat behind his match for like a handful of matches and like took notes on different like decisions with Thoughtseize, whether that be in the opening hand or like turn 5 or something, and then we would like just go back through the scenario and talk through different like thoughts and mindsets. And there was actually just like a handful of times where like when I framed the game in his perspective like through his thoughts, I totally like understood some of his lines and how he came to that, which was really interesting to me then in that specific position to think like, oh, okay, well, like what is the most optimal line then? Because like I thought this way, but like going through his specific thought process, I totally see how he came to his decision as well. And it was just like, yeah.
So sorry,
I don't know how I wanted to finish that.
You're good. I was waiting for you there, but not a problem. Yeah, I totally get that. I think Thoughtseize is a great example, and I wish that, you know, what you're talking about is something that can happen via like MTGO leagues in coaching example, but I wish there was a way that was easier on everyone to kind of have that happen in a tournament setting, because I know that for me it's a difference. But yeah, that sounds like a great example of it too, though, right? Where it's like, okay, I Thoughtseize you, and then I'm going to approach the matchup this way, and you have this kind of thought, or maybe your hand's telling you to approach the matchup in a non-conventional way, right? And then they watch it, and the coach is watching, like, I totally see how you got to that point, but maybe this is another way to approach it. And just, I think having the conversations matters so much more than the games. Like, I don't know how you feel about it, but just in general, I think games of Magic, when a format is kind of known, have super diminishing returns at a certain point, and that the conversations you can have with people are more effective and way quicker most of the time. And so for me, I really like to have conversations about things. I remember recently, before Inverter, I actually hopped in a Discord call, and I think you were there and Dylan was there, and Dylan had like a couple things that I didn't quite understand. I asked Dylan to give me his thoughts on it. He gave me some thoughts, and I was like, oh, I totally I get it now. Like, I didn't understand why we wanted so many of this in our deck before. Now I understand. And that kind of thing is huge, where I could have played a league and maybe played more games of Magic, had more experience with those cards, but never figured it out because I didn't understand the thought process behind it. So to wrap up the Patreon question here, I think just kind of asking questions to help explain it, assuming that's the way you learn. You might be a different type of learner and you might process things differently, but I can unfortunately only help you with the way I know how. That's helped me, and having the conversations what's helped me. Allie, is there anything else you want to add to this before we move on?
No, I think you pretty much nailed that there.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Adrian. If you want to ask a question just like this and have it gone over on the show, you can go to patreon.com/ccmtg. The show will always be here, but your support means a lot. And I really want to stress that during this time. If you think that maybe you shouldn't be a patron right now, don't be a patron. Times are kind of in a weird moment in our life where, like, if it feels like this is like going to be a legitimate stress, please, like, pause your patronage. You're welcome to stay in the groups and everything like that during this, crazy period of all of our lives, and then, reassess where you're at after that and just consider it on us. But please be cautious of what's going on in the world and be conscious. All right, with that all said, let's hop into our training grounds this week. Our main topic, Allie, we're going to talk about Standard, which makes my heart so happy because we never get to talk Standard.
God, I'm so happy I have a co-host that actually likes Standard. I mean, like, granted, a lot of our Rivals events are Standard, and we have a lot of Standard coming up, but people just don't have the love for Standard that I do.
I have a legit tear in my eye when you said that because I felt the same way. Oh, man. Calm, composed, we're ready to go. Yeah, so because of all these online events, most of them are actually arena based. So Allie had brought up the great point of we should talk about Standard because that's what's going to be everyone's tournaments for the most part for the next coming weeks. And so we're going to talk about some of the recent events that happened this past weekend, one of the qualifiers today, and kind of go over some decks and just have a conversation about how we might pick a deck. Allie, you're qualified for the CFB thing, right, already? Am I mistaken in that?
The weekend championships, I think they're called. Rivals and MPL are automatically qualified for that. Otherwise, during the week, Monday through Friday, I think there are 4 qualifiers a day.
Yeah, there's 4 a day. I was on Todd's stream for a minute, and he said there were 4 a day. I'm like, wait, what? They're all day?
There are 4 qualifiers each day. You have to 5-1 or 6-0, I guess. I guess at that point, if you're 5-0, you can just, like...
Scoop a homie in, Go get some food, do something.
But, yeah, so if you 5-1 or 6-0, you are then qualified for the weekend championships also, which are Standard.
Thank goodness. And all this is run via Arena. So if you have an Arena account, I believe they use Discord for the pairings or something along that lines. Or maybe it's like Smash.gg. But yeah, they run all through that, so you can do it all from the comfort of your home. So if you hadn't heard about that, maybe go check that out and then come back here to figure out what deck you're going to play. So today we had the first one that has happened. We saw people play, like, the most represented decks, the top 5 were Jeskai Fires, Mono Red Aggro, Rakdos Sack, Sultai Ramp/midrange. That deck's kind of depends on who you ask. Bant Ramp/midrange, and then Teamer Wreck. Here or there, these are kind of the decks that are very popular, and we saw a very similar thing in Lotus Box, who ran a Patreon-only tournament this past weekend with 2 Teamer Adventures, 2 Bant midrange, one of those Bant players being the winner, a Fires, a Mono Red, a 5-color Death and Taxes, which I didn't have time to look at, but
excuse me.
Yeah, I assume that's the best deck ever, just from its name alone. I don't even know how we got to a Death and Taxes deck with all 5 colors, but I really want to look that up. And then Zan played Teamer Flash. Which was just Teamer Wreck that had some flash cards in it, like Wolf. So that's kind of what's going on in the metagame right now. Is it seems like Fires, Red, Uro decks, like big mana that for some reason get called mid-rangey decks, like Hydro Crisis and stuff, and then Rakdos Sack. So Allie, what are you feeling about Standard just starting off here with one of those decks? Which one is kind of vibing with you?
I have frequently made the mistake of not playing Fires in, like, the Mythic qualifiers and Mythic point challenges, and I just that's such a mistake. Fires is just, like, one of the best decks and has been for a while, and I am high on Fires going into this weekend. I would put a lot of eggs in the Fires basket right now.
I'm right with you. It's funny because I'm actually like a pretty big Fires hater up until about right now. And even right now, I don't even think it's like the best deck. I just think it's like a very solid deck. Like if someone was like, I'm not sure what to do, but I'm picking between a couple decks, I'd be like, listen, Fires just has like these insane draws. You have like a diverse sideboard plan. You can have different sideboard plans so people don't even know what's coming. Like Fires has had like so much history and so much time put into it that like, even though right now I went and looked at some MTGO data and I saw Heliod's Intervention in the main deck as a way to like win mirrors and, you know, break up the other enchantments and stuff going on, and as a way to beat red. And so there's like all these different things you can be doing with Fires. And it just seems kind of like, this is like the level 0 in my mind, and if you can't beat Fires, then like don't come playing. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
Mm-hmm. I like what you said about just having a lot of options to do with Fires. I think Fires is a really good deck to kind of just like pick up, even if you're less familiar with it, because I think that obviously every deck is going to have like important decisions and key lines, but I think the real trick with the Fires deck is how you build the deck and how you sideboard. I think those are some of the most important aspects of the deck, whereas like maybe some of the other decks like Reclamation, you need to like really think out like 5 turns in advance.
Yeah, I'm going to flash in this Sailor now, and I'm going to choose between drawing a card or scrying 2. And I need to figure out how I'm going to counter their Nissa in 2 turns, you know? Like, I've got to plan out a big game plan ahead of here. That asks a lot of you. It rewards you if you can do it right, but it does ask a lot. And like you said, you know, I'm never going to be someone that, like, plays down a deck as, like, the dumb deck or whatever, because I think basically every deck in Magic is hard and has decisions, and every deck has free wins, but the Fires deck has some seriously free wins. And I love what you said about the sideboard plan, because I think if you have a sideboard plan that's ready for the weekend and you hit the right matchups, then you have free sideboard games as well. Because when I talk about free wins of Fires, I'm talking about game 1. And so if I get free wins in the sideboard, I don't know how I'm not top 8 in the tournament. You know, it's just insane things. So is there anything you're really liking in Fires right now, or have you not had some time to jump into it? I know you've been playing a lot of Modern and Pioneer with the stream, so.
Yeah, I know. Let's see. I actually have my current Fires sideboard guide right next to me.
Ooh, love it.
I still always a fan of Robber of the Rich and War Boss. Those are just, I've always liked the like transitional sideboard kind of thing, even though it's not like a complete transition, but it's a completely different plan than the main board of Fires. So just kind of like switching from like, hey, I'm going to play Fires and play these big creatures and then just like swing with haste or whatever. So people are trying to combat that like go big stuff, or like play spells for free, attack quickly like with haste. Whereas like post sideboard for a lot of matchups, you just like add these like small little dudes that attack and get like super aggressive before anyone can do anything. That's always been one of my favorite parts of Fires.
Yeah, I love that. I actually was playing a couple of games before we hopped in here to record, and I was playing against the Bant midrange deck, and I had built my sideboard in a way where my plan is to take out all the Fires. And so my opponent had like a disenchant or whatever, and they like threw it on some like enchantment creature. I had some weird thing in my deck, but that was terrible. I shouldn't have played it. But either way, they like had that, and I was like, okay, like you came for a different game, and I should adjust this plan just to be like mono robbers, mono war bosses. And if I do that, I'm just going to like run you over. And so like having that kind of switch, I think, is really big. Speaking of switching and running people over, Allie, what do you think about mono red right now? Because I think its only terrible matchup is Fires, which is an awkward place to be considering what I said at the top of this topic.
Yeah, that's like my issue with red. I think I've always been like a huge just mono red get 'em dead fan. It's just like kind of what I started doing in standard, playing competitively like a year and a half ago or something. And
you were like, this is an aside real quick, you
or
were
like 2 years ago,
something right on Twitter, like your name was Bolt Queen, or am I mistaken?
think so. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, so you like red.
Yeah, so always love a good red deck. But I actually, this standard, have not played red at all, which is not really like me, I guess. And I think that's just, I have decided this standard. I do not want to die to Deafening Clarion ever again.
Sure, yeah. You've made a blood pact.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can respect that. Yeah, that's really my only... I think I was talking to Spencer about this, and he was saying that he thinks red is like the best deck in standard, and I would agree if it wasn't for fires. And so it kind of... I feel like if you feel people are lower on fires going into the weekend, or you think people are going to become batting fires, then it seems like that's the perfect time to play mono red, you know? And so I really like mono red when that's kind of happening, but that deck does have some really messed up cards, like Annex, Embercleave, Torbran. Those are some messed up Magic cards.
I am so sick of Embercleave.
It's so messed up, right? It looks like a card that's for a tokens deck or something, but it's just not.
I mean, that's just another thing, too, of just, like, versus fires is kind of like, because where you're like, oh, like, Teferi, too. There's Clarion and Teferi, so you can't even Embercleave. And...
Yeah, they can kind of, like, set up, right? Like, I feel like fires... I'm sorry, I feel like mono red a lot of times, like, when they fall behind, their plan is top deck that cleave and Xaxes you, and once fires, like, sets up that Teferi, it becomes really hard to top deck that cleave and kill you. So, yeah. So, yes, I agree. I do think if you feel like fires is, like, going to be hard targeted and people are going to move off it, I think that's the time to move in. And it's going to be weird, too. I think you're going to need to look at the results for these CFB events, right? Like, if we look at the last results, Fires was the most decked by almost double of any other deck. And so if I saw that, my first instinct would be like, I need to play a deck that beats Fires. Like, maybe the Sultai deck we're talking about here in a second. If you think people are going to think like that, it might just be time to giddy up on red. Allie, I want to talk about Sultai.
Oh, boy.
I'm addicted to value. Did you see Dom's deck on Twitter?
I did. I have been playing it on Arena, actually.
Okay, what do you think? Because I haven't got to play it yet, but I think I'm in love.
This is going to be the most controversial opinion I have ever, because I am the Sultai pile girl, and I don't like it.
my heart? It was open to love from earlier standard and just ripped out. All right, what are you not liking about it? Because I haven't played it at all, but I'm just addicted to value.
I like beating Fires.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, that's a huge draw of the deck. We're playing, like, Casualties of War. We always love playing Casualties of War and ramping and just kind of getting out ahead of our opponents. And it just, like, Fires will struggle against this deck. But then there's still, like, the other half of the time where Fires still gets the nut draw and it doesn't really matter. So the other decks, though, against Sultai have kind of just not really cared about the value generated by Sultai and either win before you can, I guess, turn for Nissa or something. And I don't know. It just, like, didn't do much when I was trying it out. Like, granted, I have a lot more reps with every other deck, so that might just be me not knowing how to play the deck yet. But yeah, just initially I was not really a fan.
Yeah, I do wonder, like, hearing you talk about it and thinking about it more, not just being in love with value, like trying to be objective about it. The Bant deck kind of does a similar thing, but has stronger cards in the matchups that are maybe trying to attack these kind of rampy strategies in the form of Elspeth Conquers Death, which is also just like, I don't know if you've ever played with against Fires with Bant, but that card's just like a house. Like, if they don't have the card actual Fires Dimension, and in game one they have to play their clunky, like, Canrith and Sphinx, like their box topper cards, they just don't compete with your 5 mana, kill that thing, get back your unbeatable card, you know? So
oh yeah, if I'm trying to beat Fires, I will register Bant all day. I played Bant in one of the Mythic Point challenges. I tested Bant with Emma when she was playing Fires for the last MIQ. I think she like 9-0 or 9-2 or something. And I mean, like, our matchups just consisted of me beating her for an hour until she, like, figured out a plan that she wanted to attack Bant with. But it just seems very favored for Bant. So if you're trying to beat Fires, I would register Bant instead of Sultai.
Yeah, I think after talking about it and thinking about it a bit more objectively, I do like that more. I do have a soft spot for Bant. I qualified for my first Pro Tour with it. But that deck really does offer a lot of the same things, and unless you believe, I think like probably the selling point is you believe Casualties of War is stronger than Teferi and Elspeth Conquers Death, and not to mention that combination against some decks is nigh unbeatable, and I just don't believe that's true. Like after objectively thinking about it, and the Bant deck just has like you have access to board clears if you want that, so you're not going to lose to the red deck that could be preying on you as easily. So. Yeah, I do think that maybe Bant's the way. So we're kind of talking about Bant here. So we kind of both agree that maybe if we were trying to be like the attacker of fires, we would play Bant. Is that the vibe I'm getting?
Yeah.
Can we talk about Uro for a second then before we move on? Since, we did spend a little bit of time already on Bant. That card's so good.
Uro is just like, I see Uro in every format, and I don't know. I love it, but...
I haven't been keeping up with Legacy. Now that the Breach is gone, is it seeing some Legacy play as well?
I haven't played a ton of Legacy. I don't think I've seen it in Legacy yet, but I've definitely seen it all over Modern, Pioneer, and of course Standard with just like a decent amount of these standard decks. We have Reclamation, we have Bant, we have Sultai. Just very like solid popular card. I'm sure everyone's sick of Simic by now, but there's a special place in my heart for Simic.
Sure, that's fair. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised just to, like in the Legacy talk there. I bet that card's Legacy playable, if not so close. Like maybe the fact that it gets hit by like Red Blast and stuff is not good, but I don't know. It seems very strong.
Maybe when Oko gets banned in Legacy.
Oh yeah, I forgot that card has to interact. Man, they put those cards in the same format. What a wild time. Maybe Uro wasn't as good when it got Oko'd a bunch. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of getting Uro'd in a bunch and things like that, let's talk about Blue-White, which was the deck. We saw Zach Allen destroy the SCG Tour with winning a Classic, top 4ing an Open, and winning an Open, all with Blue-White. We also saw Corey Bymaster do a very similar run during that exact same time. And then these Bant decks popped up. But if we think maybe people are resting on the Bant decks a little bit, people are switching to Fires, what do you think about Blue-White?
I was a Blue-White fan for a really long time, pretty much as soon as I saw the card Dream Trawler. It's kind of fallen off for the most part of what I've seen. Few stragglers here and there, just like diehard Blue-White fans. So like, I think it's always a deck that's going to be like fine, at least in Standard, but I think a lot of these like Sultai and Bant decks can kind of just outvalue Blue-White. I mean, the last time that I think I would have registered Blue-White was literally in Worlds when PVDDR won.
Yeah, I think it was great for that tournament, which shows that because that tournament was also like a week and a half behind, right? Like they had to submit their deck list like way ahead of time, and so it kind of shows just how quickly things adapt. Yeah, I was with you. I wasn't a huge Dream Trawler fan. I actually thought Dream Trawler wouldn't be good enough for Standard because in my mind I thought Jun Food was still really good, and Korvald kind of like checks that card. But once Korvald's gone, rest in peace, I can say that card like really takes over a game. And yeah, I was really loving Blue-White. And then people started playing Uro and Elspeth Conquers Death and Hydroid Krasis and Nissa, and there's just too many threats. And they're all too good too. You just can't let any of them slip through.
I think the problem with Blue-White is like you can't really keep up with a lot of these decks, whether it be like red kind of going fast and then throwing out what is it, Annex?
Yeah, Annex.
So just get like all of those creatures back when you're dead if you board wipe, or like we're looking at like the Sultai and Bant piles, just like they're gonna ramp and you're not really too interested in countering the ramp cards, and then all of a sudden they're double spelling while you have an absorb in hand.
Yeah.
And 3 mana.
Or like they're like tapping all out for Hydroid Krasis, and it's like, okay, well I countered the 8/8, but they drew 4 cards. So
not great.
Yeah. Even if they drew 4 lands, that just meant all my time is gone. Oh no. Like it's so bad. Yeah.
Like also with the emergence of the Rakdos sacrifice deck. I mean, like obviously we had like Jun sacrifice in the past, but I think Rakdos even more so. Just like additional sacrificing thing. It has like Woe Strider in it too. You can just, it's just like super hard to interact with because you can't necessarily kill anything because it's just all going to come back or interact in different ways that don't line up well for you.
Yeah, 100%. So the Rakdos Sacrifice deck has been the deck that probably 2 or 3 weeks ago was probably more like 2 weeks ago really popped up as like the deck, right? I don't know if you follow F2K Ashlas on Twitter, but she has been like consistently pushing towards number 1 and has like hit 2, hit 3, hit 4, and then like fallen back a little bit and just climbed back playing mono Rakdos Sacrifice. That's all she plays. And so I've watched that stream a good bit, and that deck is powerful. Like, surprisingly so. Like, it's a synergy deck, and the synergy pieces don't look super strong, but they all play together like kind of absurdly well, and they're just so good against like basically everything going on except fires. And that's like the only thing that scares me about that deck. Well, it's one of two things. It gets broken up. It could get broken up, and then a fires matchup. But yeah, the Rakdos Sac deck is impressive. Have you got to play with that anywhere or play against it much?
I haven't got to play it too much. I know, well, kind of like an issue we talked about in our Always Improving segment of just kind of decks not really like clicking. So like that deck just like didn't click with me. So maybe I will challenge myself this week to start playing some more Rakdos Sacrifice and see how that goes.
Yeah, it is surprisingly good. Like, I'll watch Ash stream, and she just has these turns where like, or it's like 2 turns before, I'm just like in my head, I'm like, okay, you've got to draw like insanely well. They need to draw a double land for you to get out of this. And then she doesn't draw insanely well, and they draw well, and she wins 3 turns later. And I'm like, wait, what happened? Like, I was watching this whole game. How did you get out of this? There's just so much incidental value. And yeah, it does get underneath all of these other decks. Like, we've seen Team of Reclamation, which we'll talk about in a second, re-rise up as a way to kind of get these fire decks kind of caught in a pinch on being clunky at times, and then also beat the ramp decks by going over the top with Expansion Explosion and kind of had the Frilled Mystic Flash aspect. But this deck really punishes those decks, kind of like Mono Red, where it like gets in early and pressures them, but it also just has this weird potential to grind that Mono Red doesn't have outside of like an Embercleave gotcha moment. It's very unique. I'm very surprised by that deck, like basically every time I watch it. Let's talk about Reclamation, though. So this was a deck that we kind of talked about, blue-white, Rose of Prominence, right? And then we saw Will Pulliam and them destroy SCG Richmond with that deck. And then it kind of started popping up everywhere. Then, like, 2 weeks went by, and it was gone. And now it's back. Like, what happened?
Oh, yeah. I love Wilderness Reclamation. That card, oh, I love it. I definitely miss the days of Nexus of Fate, but I think Reclamation. What?
I'm sorry. Say what? You miss Nexus of Fate?
I love Nexus of Fate. That's
all right.
like...
Well, that will do it for this week's episode. Tune in next week where
like 3 of my results were Nexus of Fate. Oh,
okay. All right. I'll forgive you this time.
I love it.
You're young and in love. Your heart isn't hardened like me. You know.
It's not even legal anymore. Let me enjoy it.
That's so true. I played it in Modern recently. I actually played Bob and Cheese's like weird Bully Green gift deck, and I nexted some people. It was a wild time.
Oh boy.
Yeah. All right, keep talking. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you there. So
you
missed Nexus of Fate.
I missed Nexus of Fate. I think I haven't gotten to play a lot of the Reclamation deck recently because I don't know. I think I have a bias towards those kind of decks, so I try and approach Standard kind of more objectively. I think Fires is just better positioned than it, so I haven't really played Reclamation competitively in the Standard yet. But no, I think it's really solid against a lot of these decks. I think it does struggle when there is any amount of interaction against it. Can kind of, in my experience, I've been testing it a little bit, it's kind of prone to not really like doing anything in these kind of like more interactive builds of the deck. Like I've had a lot of times where I'm like, oh, okay, like I can Brazen Burrow this, I can like stomp this or like kill this or whatever, and then I don't really have anything else outside of that.
Yeah, you kind of have like these weird like stopgap measures, right, to kind of like buy you time towards winning the game, but you don't really like, except for like double Wilderness Wreck Expansion Explosion, you don't have anything like really powerful going on, you know?
Yeah, like with some of the old versions of the deck, like not even in the Standard, like people had at least like ways to search up like the win con or like, I don't know, like actually do something proactive. Whereas I think the current builds of the deck are much more reactive, like responding. It has like board wipes, it has some counter spells, some spot removal and stuff like that. But then I think that opens you up to the problem of getting to a point where you can't really dig as much for stuff you need. Like obviously there's Thassa's intervention in some lists, which can like kind of help you, but in my experience it just felt like the deck was being too reactive now.
Yeah, it was interesting. So I watched a good amount of the Lotus Box tournament yesterday, and they featured Zan a good bit because he was just running like really well, as you know Zan does when you're a great player, you run really well. And he was playing like a really reactive hybridized version of like Simic Flash and Reclamation. And it was interesting to me because it felt like, and maybe I'm just approaching it the wrong way, but it felt like it accentrified the problems that Rec had and didn't help in a new way, right? Like, sure, some games he like double Night Pack ambushed someone and just killed them, right? But I don't think that like helps the problem. It kind of accentuates it. We have just more reactive cards, you know, to like enable that one. So it's interesting to see how it feels like maybe they need to do what Fires does and have like a more transformative sideboard, you know, like more Robber of the Riches, more War Bosses, more things like that, like plan to play your Bone Crusher Giant as a 4/3 and get in there. So yeah, it's very interesting to me.
Yeah, that was definitely always more of my interest there.
Was to sideboard like more proactively?
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember they used to play Niv Mizzet, the 6-mana one from RTR, or Ravnica Legion, sorry. That one was like kind of good. I guess it just doesn't pan out that way anymore, does it?
No, yeah, just like going over it again, just everything seems more reactive, and I don't know.
Yeah, it just doesn't. It's kind of missing something. I'm sure it's still quite strong. I'm sure like when you have your double Rec draws, like you just destroy people. You have such a mana advantage, but that seems to be like its real plan to be proactive is the Slam Wilderness Reclamations, which is kind of strong, but if they get Elspeth Conquers Death, or, you know, Teferi kind of messes them up like on both ends, right? Like you can't use that extra mana, and then also makes you like commit the mana again, even if you try to answer the Teferi. So it does have some problem there. And we haven't like really mentioned it a whole lot, but Teferi's still like a big part of this format, you know? And so it kind of, in my mind, I don't know how you feel about this, but it feels like there's like proactive decks, and that's like Rakdos, Fires, and Red. Then there's like these mid-rangey-ish decks, which are like the Bant and the Sultai, even though they're like ramp decks. They're kind of like the closest thing we have to traditional mid-range because they just outvalue real mid-range decks. And then we have these go over the top decks that are kind of reactive, like Reclamation and Temur Clover, which we'll talk about in a second. And it feels like the go over the top decks still struggle with the other two decks because the other two decks like have main deck hate cards in some of the ways, in the form of like Teferi and both of those kind of different pile lists. Would you agree with that assessment, or do you feel like I'm kind of off there?
No, I agree with you. I feel like, especially right now, I really wouldn't want to play a deck that just loses to Teferi currently. And I think like that might be an additional reason I've kind of moved off of like blue-white and like Temur Rec as well, is just like, I love playing at instant speed, but if I can't manage to function at sorcery speed when necessary, I'm just not gonna have a good time there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I agree with that. Yeah, it is almost like a check-in with yourself, right? It's like you said earlier, like you've decided that you do not want to lose to the card Deafening Clarion, and that's kind of like your mantra, your guiding light in this format, right? And it's kind of like with me, I'm like, I don't think I'm down to lose to Teferi, especially when there's so much Teferi. So yeah. Well, let's talk about Temur Clover, since that's kind of the last deck we have on our list here, and it's also kind of goes in the same camp as this deck, but it's much more proactive. But the deck's really fallen off since it kind of had its resurgence here. Like maybe a month and a half ago, it was like the deck. Then people just started adapting to it, and they seem to be able to beat it. What do you think about Temur Clover? Is the time now? Is it like the perfect mix of what we were talking about? Where are you at with it?
I think it definitely thrived on right after Worlds, blue-white being big popularity resurgence again. So like I think that's where a lot of the Teamer Clover things stem from, because you're just kind of like drawing your deck, you're outvaluing blue white, you're ramping better than everyone else because you have a Clover into Beanstalk Giant, and just
and Escape the Wilds too.
Escape the Wild, you're drawing cards from Edgewell Innkeeper, and it's just like you're outvaluing all of the decks that are either trying to like one for one you, kind of like keep up with you, or even you're outvaluing the decks that are other value decks as well. So like I think now Teamer like might be a consideration. I think it's probably at least like even with like Bant, maybe Salta. I don't really have a conception of Teamer Adventures versus Sultai, but I know with Bant it was always very close.
Yeah.
Kind of who could get the value first, and just like if you like outvaluing your opponent, Teamer Adventures is definitely where you want to be.
Yeah, I love that. If you think people are going to be playing games of Magic that are about, you know, who can get the most cards, Lucky Clover makes it pretty easy to have the most cards, I promise. So, yeah, I really like that. I agree. I think I don't have a great conception of it right now. I also agree that it did a great job of preying on blue-white, and that's like why it popped up so much. And so maybe the metagame's just at a point where there are enough decks similar-ish to blue-white that it's happening, and there's enough Krasis decks. But yeah, I'm a little hesitant to register Clover, even though it's done pretty well and it's showed up in, you know, pretty reasonable numbers. I also think that's just a deck that's kind of fun to play, you know? And so I'm not surprised to see it have popularity, right? It's just, like, really cool.
Yeah, the deck is super cool. I definitely enjoyed playing it. It was a lot of fun. I don't think I would bring myself to register it right now. I think if there's resurgence in blue-white, I would register it pretty quickly, but I just don't think that's what we're really seeing right now in the results.
Yeah, I agree. Well, that's going to kind of do it for our standard wrap-up here. Before we end it, Allie, right now, if you had to lock in a deck, are your fires in? Are you banting? Where are you at? If you had to lock in this second.
Oh, I think I gotta just do fires. I think it's just been the best deck. I think it's going to keep being the best deck. I have tricked myself every time into not registering fires, so I need to just like suck it up and put on my big girl pants and register fires.
Awesome. I think I'm there with you. I think I want to figure out a plan for my sideboard that maybe is, I don't want to like a super cute plan, but just like a reasonable plan that maybe people aren't expecting as much. Register that and go in there. I'll message you on Thursday. Make sure you're registering fires. I'll hold your feet to the fires when it comes to that. And we'll have to come back next week and talk about how you won the CFB thing playing fires.
All right.
Yeah, it's not too much to ask for on the end of the first episode, right? Just I need you to win a major event.
Well, we'll see.
Okay. All right.
We'll definitely see.
All right. Well, you can come back either way. You know, maybe you can apologize for the Nexus of Fate love. You know, I'm sure our listener rate dropped at that point, but maybe they'll loop back around just like Nexus did. If you enjoyed the show, you can always go to patreon.com/ccmtg and help support the show. You also go to our sponsor at Oasis Games. Allie, if someone wants to find you and message you and say, hey, I loved your first time on CC, the start of many, many more, where can they find you? Where can they watch you stream?
Well, they can watch me stream at twitch.tv/mythic_Meebo. It's MEEBO. Don't ask me what Amiibo is. I don't know. And on Twitter, it's Mythic Meebo, no underscore.
Awesome. You can find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/TheMasonClark, and you can find me on Twitter at Mason E. Clark. One day, someone will leave their Mason E. Clark Twitch account, and I'll take that one. But until then, I'm the Mason Clark.
There's this company that's just Meebo. Oh. And it's been inactive on Twitter for like 6 years, and they won't delete the account. I want it so bad.
Oh, dang. We're going to need to pull in some heavy hitters and get this taken care of so we can just get the Meebo.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Allie, I had a great time this first episode, and we'll see you all here next week for another episode of Constructed Criticism.